welcome to episode 48 of the Sports Geek podcast. On this week's podcast, I catch up with Michael Artis in London and talk about stadium design and how it's changing in the world of sports. And my chat with Dan McLaren at Digital Sport London on this week's Sports Geek podcast.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for the sports digital marketer. And now, here's your host, who is on his third Nike Fuel Band, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. That's right. My name is Sean Callanan, and you're listening to another Sports Geek podcast. I'm now back in Melbourne, getting back in the swing of things, and we'll get back on the schedule of posting podcasts weekly. On today's show, I've got a couple of interviews from my visit to London, catching up with Michael Artis from 2020, talking about design in sports and how it is changing, both from a point of view of logos and team logos and the like, but also all the way through to stadium design and interior design. And we talk about some interesting stuff that he's done in the world of sport. And also I've got my fireside chat with Dan McLaren from Digital Sport London. Thanks again to Dan for inviting me. And, really good to catch up with some of the digital sport people in London. Very similar problems, similar issues that we're all facing around the world. So it was a good chat. So I've included that. I've got some more of the Q&A that I may include in future podcasts. So thank you very much for sharing the podcast. You can get Sports Geek Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. As always, you can get me via Twitter at Sean Callanan, or on the Sports Geek Facebook page, or just simply send me an email if you've got a question or you want to discuss something on the podcast. That'd be Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. But first, here's my chat with Michael Artis from 2020. Very happy here in Camden Town, I believe I am, or at least that's what Google Maps told me where I am when I pulled up. And I'm here with a good friend of mine that I met in New Zealand for Sports Business NZ back in 2012. Michael Artis from 2020. Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, first of all, and thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you for coming all this way, Sean, to say hello.
Yeah, so first of all, tell us a little bit about what your role is and what 2020 does in the sports space.
Yeah, well, 2020, we're 26 years old now. I head up the sports and entertainment division, and I think since 2001 we've been working with some of the sort of top clubs in the EPL, so English Premier League, in the soccer territory, so the likes of Arsenal, Manchester City, Liverpool Football Club, and Chelsea, with that kind of wonderfully vague topic of helping them do a better job for their fans.
Yep.
What that means is effectively understanding the fan, what their demands are, and then effectively either creating some better communications and brands, and or helping them with their hospitality spaces for their VIPs.
So it is a like you said, it is a broad sort of spectrum, because you've looked at rebadging and updating of logos, as well as helping the branding and the kit out of all these new stadiums that are popping up.
Yeah, effectively, you remember from our chat in New Zealand that we're the guys that mucked around with the Arsenal badge, and it was kind of in 2001. There were whole shenanigans going on with that badge, and the club wanted to take ownership of it, and very much become part of the new era of the club. And we had to effectively speak to fans and say, we're going to change the thing that's tattooed to your body.
Yep.
And although you never directly asked those sort of questions, we had to get informed, and to effectively then redesign and recreate that iconic logo. Was a bit of a tall order, but I hope the fans love it. I certainly know it got booed originally, but no one.
Well, everyone. I know, especially in digital and social media, everyone hates change.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
anytime there's a change, a minor adjustment to a website, Facebook make a minor change. It's the worst thing in the world.
And ironically, a lot of so it does a job for fans, but a lot of that design cleverness is so that it works really small on digital. Back in 2001, before I guess internet really existed as such, it was that the old logo was strobing on TV, and that was the problem. So it had all this heraldic details and lots of. It was a good few years old.
But
we cleaned it up.
You need to be able to see it quite clearly in a 16 by 16 pixel.
Yeah.
In a little icon.
Exactly, and that was, it was fascinating that almost good design practice then has still made it a relevant and I guess fairly modern badge now for a club that's over 125 years old.
And so from the stadium side of view, what you did speak about that in New Zealand. What's the kind of things you're looking at from a stadium point of view?
Yeah.
When do you guys get involved? Is it after they've drawn up the initial plans and then we've got these internal spaces?
Yeah.
How can we use them? Is that where you sort of come in?
Normally, what happens is the stadium is built, and then about 3 years later, the club or the stadium operator realises that things haven't quite worked out as originally planned. People have a horrible tendency of doing not what they were meant to do. They all walk left rather than walking right. And so a lot of the work we do is effectively helping that stadium better suit or better cater for at VIP level hospitality lounges. So again, at Arsenal, the Diamond Club, famously we've put a Michelin star chef in a very VIP experience, and nothing has been left to chance. The theory is that fan journey is managed from 3 days before they go to the game to 2 days after. We kind of go to that forensic detail, but those are the sort of spaces we design. But I think our strength is doing it in a way that engages the fan into the thing they love.
Yep.
So I think, like you, I do a lot of benchmarking. I've just come back from the States, and certainly seeing some of these wonderful new stadia.
Yep.
What they do really well is take a lot of money from a naming rights partner and go, right, it's called the Bobbins Lounge.
Yep. Yep.
And what they fundamentally do is plaster bobbins everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And from a fan point of view, whether you're a VIP or a member of GA, I like bobbins for helping my team, but I want to know more about my team.
Yep.
And so a lot of the sort of experiences we design try and fuse that naming partner with the fan and the club.
Yep.
So one of the perfect examples again at the Emirates Stadium at Arsenal is working with Emirates Airline and Arsenal to create a lounge that celebrates both parties, so the fan can go in there and go, this is a great space for me. So as that example, the stories we tell are about fans all around the world, and guess what, those locations that we featured just happen to be the destination that Emirates fly to.
Yep.
And so you're tying in the two jobs of the naming partner and what
because it does have that airline lounge feel. That's all part of those small touches.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that you would have seen as it goes through, and I've seen it sort of going and seeing stadiums, especially in the US, is the rise of the digital displays and how flexible they are. Going from menu boards that used to be quite static to now having these dynamic changing. Even as the hot dogs get sold out, that they change and different kinds of advertising. How much has that changed what you guys do? And effectively, it's just like a bit Willy Wonka style. It's just opened up all these new opportunities.
Yeah, I think, fingers crossed that San Francisco 49ers get it nailed with their 70,000 fat cable of Wi-Fi or whatever they're planning to do there. I think from a operation point of view, digital is doing a great job. It's, as you say, allowing dynamic pricing. It's allowing, right, we're going to get you in 2 hours early, beer's half price. All the screens changed, everybody's happy. That is good. I think where we're still struggling is when there's more than, 8,000 people in any space. The Wi-Fi connectivity suddenly falls through the roof, falls through the floor. And I'm also, I don't know yet, to be brutal honest, in terms of some of the things that I've seen in the US certainly work for that type of sport.
Oh, definitely.
That's stoppy-starty, and there's lots of stats and lots of
So football, football, soccer, that is the dominant sport here, is that continuous play.
Yeah, you've got 45 minutes. The last thing you want to be doing is looking down at anything.
And that's the same that we have in Australia with Australian rules and the NRL. that they're very much a continuous play. And, I'm of the opinion that, when I'm at a game, if I'm at the MCG, I'm watching the game. I'm not looking away at my phone for a replay, or rarely looking at the screens. And it does tend to lend itself to that. I mean, we haven't seen, I guess, cricket take on the same advancements that MLB has in baseball, because it does have those stops and starts at the end of an over. I've seen it at the SCG just this last summer. Because they'd put in the Wi-Fi, the amount of content coming out of the stadium was phenomenal. Yeah. Because one, you had the breaks in the play. There were so many wickets tumbling with English. I didn't want to mention that, but there's so many opportunities for the fans to tweet.
You come over here.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to get a few cracks in. Getting back to the stadium and the design stuff. So, what are the things that you're looking at to try to solve that problem or work around that problem, I guess?
Yeah, it's interesting. Certainly, one of the biggest moves, certainly in the UK, is Wembley. You've just got a new partner with EE, Everything Everywhere.
Yep.
It was Orange and T-Mobile, I think. They combined. So they're now the lead sponsor of effectively our national stadium, and I think everybody's looking at that to see what does that mean. At the moment, it means that they have branded the stadium.
Yep.
And I think it alludes to a promise, Wembley connected by EE.
Well, it's do they go down the path of the San Francisco Giants, AT&T Park?
Yeah.
AT&T Park, if you look at, loved brands in the US, they're not high in the rankings.
Yeah.
But they've spent, and this hasn't been a let's turn it on project, it's been a 6-year project where they've constantly upgraded the Wi-Fi, and AT&T Park, one of the most Instagram venues in the world, because they've got the Wi-Fi. And I joke about, when you're taking some video at AT&T Park, it's uploaded before you finish. That's how it is now. We've had similar deals where we've had Telstra, which is the major mobile provider in Australia, that they've had the naming rights for venues, and they haven't rolled it out, and they've just had the naming rights. Yeah. And luckily, they've let those naming rights lapse, because if they were, still had them now in a social media age, people would be complaining, "Hey, Telstra, you've got the naming rights. Why can't I text or tweet or post?"
I think it's really interesting. I think Wembley, I think EE have made it 4G. It's one of the rare spaces certainly in London, let alone UK, that's now 4G. And I think it alludes to a bigger promise, and looking forward to see what that will mean. I think going back to our earlier point, there's definitely a role in the pre-game build-up and then that post-analysis review, certainly within soccer. And obviously it'll be interesting to see how the World Cup fare. And what I think is missing in the in-stadium experience is still the mindset of, as you just alluded to, that naming rights behaviour. So, when I'm at Wembley watching a game, at half-time, those digital boards that are bowl side, why are they still talking like they're talking to a TV audience?
Yep.
There's 90,000 of us here. Why don't you do something that, which side can cheer the loudest to move the digital ball or whatever it is, or tweet if you want us to go louder, all that kind of stuff. That still hasn't happened, and I think that
is happening. There's guys, and I've spoken to Heikki Aura, and I hope I get his name right, from Applause. So it's out of Sweden, and they've effectively got that volume. They've rolled it out at Madison Square Garden and a few of the baseball. And initially it was in ice hockey in Sweden, and it's a fit for that closed bowl stadium, and they've modified their games to now work in that larger environment, to say, right side you yell, left side you yell, and it's interactive video, and it gets that fan going, because we've now got to really amp up the experience for the fan in the stadium, because the experience that the fan gets out of the stadium is getting so much better. Like, you've got the high def TV, you've got the multi-angle type of thing that you can pull up, you've got your iPad or your second screen, whatever that is. Fans are wanting more of that,
and I think that also I don't know what the regulation is going to do, because I certainly know from Arsenal. I mean, Liverpool Football Club, one of the clubs we work with, hasn't got a digital screen in Stadia yet, and it's kind of wow. And obviously they've got new Stadia developments coming, but I'm pretty sure any health and safety officer, any stadium, whatever the regulations say, if you've got a contentious sporting incident, certainly in a soccer game, you don't want a replay to be published. And the last thing you want, whether you're allowed to do it with TV deals and the rest of it, if you want it streaming to your iPhone or whatever, you don't want those dodgy decisions broadcast. And so it comes back to, you almost need a digital approach. That, are you in the stadium? Yes, right. Well, this is your digital experience. It's about enhancing the 2 sets of 45 minutes. And it's about the pre-stuff, the middle stuff, and the end stuff. But we'll keep the game itself sacrosanct. We'll respect it.
And that's pretty much like how much of your work is now getting into the mobile space, because effectively that's what the mobile apps that are being built. And last year at SEAT, we saw the guys at Barclays Centre in New Jersey. Their app has the geo-fencing, so you get up off the subway and the app starts to transform into an in-arena app, and it'll tell you where the concessions are, or it might have mini highlights. The guys at Sporting Innovations with their Sporting KC app, it does have the quick replays, because they're quite lucky in that they own the whole pipeline from the guys recording it and to the TV, so the mobile gets its piece there. I thought it is becoming an app play. I spoke to Kenny Lauer at the Golden State Warriors. They're building that new stadium, and they don't quite, they don't know what 2017, so they don't know what the technology will be then. Do they have to do stuff for Google Glass?
It's the future.
It's contextual computing, and how does that fit? But it is pretty much in that mobile space that the mobile app might have your season ticket on it. We will be in this walletless society potentially, and you want to be able to just go up and swipe your rewards card and get to your seat and order from your seat. So these are all things that 3 years ago, Wi-Fi was a dream, and now Wi-Fi is getting to be, it's a utility of a stadium.
And I think that's almost the music to the ears. If you can make it an enabler rather than necessarily I guess as a sports purist myself, I like second screen when I'm sitting at home. I like my iPad when I'm watching Formula One. Oh, okay, somebody's just doing this in the pit crew. Great. I like all that. But if I'm in the stadium, some of this peer-to-peer stuff, well, if I want to speak to somebody, I'll probably turn around and speak to somebody. I don't necessarily need to, knock them over via Twitter or something. But certainly for the in-stadium game time experience, the idea of pre-order your half-time drink, we'll have it waiting for you, or we recognise you've walked through gate B today and you're meant to be in gate E, your mobile phone vibrates and tells you you're in the wrong location. All of those sort of things I think are just, I walking around New York 3 weeks ago, if I didn't have my iPhone with me, I'd have literally got lost.
I'm the same. I nearly didn't get here, but if I didn't have it.
And so I think the expectation, certainly from a customer and fan point of view, is it should just happen. And I think that, to answer your question, I guess what we're seeing is our creativity is moving into a more digital platform. But I think our expertise is in the physical. So it's more, how does digital enhance this physical thing, not how does digital replace this physical thing.
So it's making the design work for the digital options that are there, but then also, future-proof what your design is.
And that, I think when we were talking in New Zealand, I sort of said we have a mantra here of, there are 3 things that a fan wants: belonging, access, and exclusivity.
And winning.
Move winning away. Weirdly, I've got so in my other life, on the leisure side, we work with casinos and everything else. If you look at the psychology of a gambler, they're very similar to a sports fan. And although no one would admit this, out the bat, actually losing has got a lot to do with why you support or that belief in being part of a tribe. It's the losing makes the winning better.
Oh, definitely.
And some of those lows are actually as important. Not that you'd ever say this.
And there'll be people, who are listening who run, digital and the social accounts when the fan loses. That was my phone going off, so you can
just
turn
check
yours
mine.
off. I'm a professional. I've done this 46 episodes. You reckon I'd turn it off? But yeah, when the team loses and the pain and the hurt that the fans, and we effectively give them the hour of just blowing off steam.
Yeah.
And and almost you've got to be empathetic and take them through because they grieve for an hour.
Yeah.
But then 7 days later,
you've got the chance.
An hour before the game.
Yeah.
It's their most optimistic of the week, and I can see that that gambler cycle.
Yeah.
But it is if you lose 3 in a row, that win that you have in that fourth week is euphoric. So I just want to go back to we've sort of danced around the stadium discussion, and you're probably abreast with the Mark Cuban, Vivek Ranadive, the owner of the Sacramento Kings, sort of playing the Mark Cuban, the low tech.
Yeah.
Make it fun.
Yeah.
If they're not looking at their phone, I've done my job.
Yeah.
To the Vivek Ranadive from the Sacramento Kings, so I want it completely teched up, and I want to be able to service that fan.
Yeah.
Where do you sit?
It was interesting. I can't remember his name, and I should do. Name check 49ers, San Francisco 49ers. The guy in charge there effectively said his mission is to create 70,000, I think he said unique or personalised moments, personalised journeys, whatever it is. If that means we're responding to 70,000 unique requirements, and that recognises I'm in a wheelchair or recognises that my friend is actually 3 rows in front of me, I would love to be able to meet up with him at half time, great. If that means 70,000 people looking elsewhere when the game's on, not so great.
Yep.
And I don't know if I'm allowed to be kind of plumb in the middle of those two.
And I don't think it is a either or, but I think it's been a great discussion. The fact that and it comes down a bit of personal. I think you and I both much rather watch the game, so it sort of says we're in the Cuban camp. But I do know, and I've got 2 teenage kids, and they go to the game and they are texting with their mates or doing other things. So it's a bit each to their own.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more. Social media and the rest has enabled us to be a little bit more braggy with what we're doing. Hey, look where I'm sitting. Look what I think. Probably based on the type of sport you're watching, how much of a fan you are of that sport and the pace that's going on will all determine the right digital. God, I sound like a consultant. The right digital solution for you. Yeah. Because I think there is something. What we're working with Ascot Racecourse. That's a 7-hour event. That's baseball. It's cricket. It's a day time. It's a day out.
Yep.
Compare that to a 2.5-hour soccer match. It's an intense burst of activity, and your digital requirements are different. So
I think you were saying there about the 70,000 unique experience of the 49ers. I guess what I can sort of lean back on is hearing Rob Heinemann from Sporting Innovations talk at SEAT in 2011, and he talked about effectively the birth of the franchise and when they built Sporting Park. It was Livestrong Park at the time, but Lance lost his naming rights off that stadium.
Why was that again?
Yeah, exactly. And you work in the entertainment space and understand it. They modelled that customer journey and what they're offering to the customer on Disney World.
Yeah.
So and I think at the time they had 25,000 scripts for the whole of the stadium, and it could be here's the script that the parking attendant had when they took your ticket to go in to. He knew it. I think it was at 7:00. The mixologists, which is very much an American term, but the mixologists will come out in the cocktail bar and do their little show, and it would go for 3 minutes. And part of that script would be they'll be doing their Tom Cruise cocktail type of thing. The lights would change. And running those, and it was a work in progress. They didn't just roll that 25,000 in day one, but it sort of makes that 70,000 person experience. It's sort of like your own choose your own adventure. So depending on where you are in the stadium, you have that own unique experience. But it's a bunch of little ones, and it's exactly the same at Disney World. If you see, I think one of the scripts is if you see Buzz and Woody in Disney World, and you say Andy's mom, they fall dead. Right? And it's just a script that they have, and it's sort of an Easter egg. If you don't know it, say that and they just fall dead because Andy's mum's coming.
Good knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's because we do a lot of fan research, and it's interesting. You get as an industry, we're all getting more professional. A fan hates to be called a customer.
Yep.
And I think I think we as professionals need to take the duty of customer journeys and that logic and adapt it to a fan. And I think that's really interesting, that unique experience, as soon as it becomes scheduled, I think people will start questioning its authenticity.
Yep.
And getting back to the belonging, access, exclusivity, if it isn't genuine, then I'm not, you're trying to do me over as a fan. And I want the access, I want the bit that no one else can see, or I had to be here to see that. So I think that's really exciting, and certainly from an English point of view,
Yep.
they don't like the American everything glossy white.
Yep.
And I think
because there's very much that tribal nature, and they want to still feel part of that, and that's really core, part of their core values.
Yeah. But it's not to say it can't be entertaining, but it can't be sickly sweet.
Yep.
And I think there is a bit of everything we need to do needs to promise you, your hell of a lot of money that you're spending to come to the stadium is going to be an entertaining day out. And let's not forget, we're competing with the likes of Disney World and all the rest of it to get punters through the door. But everything we do in the stadium needs to remove the need to win.
Yep.
We need to make it a great day out and a great experience, but an authentic experience. And I think what Liverpool did really well recently, and they got a little bit of flack in the press for it, was just saying what's not acceptable. But that was more from a behavioural point of view.
Yep.
So it's about swearing and racism and all that kind of stuff. But they actually documented it to every member of staff. It wasn't a script. It was just saying, if you hear this, it's not acceptable.
Yep.
We don't want you to say these sort of things. It's not acceptable. And I think that was a real recognition that, as one of, they kind of consider themselves more of like a family base rather than a fan base.
Yep.
It's just not appropriate for you to be speaking around my kids with that kind of behaviour.
Yep.
And that's not to take the edge away about we're here to see this gladiatorial match, but it's just not the way Liverpool do it. And I think those are sort of things that we need to be receptive of, no matter what platforms we're on, or whether it's a real experience or a digital experience or a digital enhanced real experience. All of those things are really important to just understand. And I don't think we'll ever be in a position that says, great, this works really well for Formula One, we're going to put it straight into soccer, or this works for American rules.
Well, it's back to what you said, you've got to know that fan. And so, a football fan and a racing, motor racing fan to a horse racing fan, you were talking about Ascot before, they all come at it from different backgrounds, they come at it for different reasons. That, the football fan is there with this tribal passion that want to see the win, and, the horse racing fan might have that same passion for the horse race, but they might be there, their primary reason might be to network and be entertained and be seen and be in the in the papers and those kind of things. So it's a different focus. So the fan engagement experience that you sort of develop has to cater for that.
It's such a fascinating time, and I know from the work you guys do at Sport Geek, it moves every minute, every second. What I like about I guess the things we both do is it comes down to that empathy with the fan, understanding what the club's trying to do, what the fan wants, and not necessarily subserviently following what the fan wants, but going, right, this is what we believe in, and we're going to do this creatively, and we're going to do this differently because this is right for you as whomever fan base you are. And I think that takes a brave club or a brave stadium operator that isn't just about fast following, because you fast follow, as soon as you fast followed, you're already 3 steps behind anyway. You're better off to do something different. I still love Philadelphia Union in the States, the MLS team, that almost have like the classic retail loyalty card where if you come and it's raining, we give you double points and all that kind of stuff. That I just like it because it's doing the right thing and it's rewarding a fan in a really simple way. In the same way, we're designing experiences that are so ridiculously premium, but it's taking it to a new level. And it's taking it to a new audience, and you're reimagining what a football or a soccer experience could be. Exciting times.
Well, thank you very much for having me out here, and thank you very much for being on the podcast. I have got a small gift.
He's taken down his trousers leg. Oh no, yes.
No, that's it. It's lucky it's a podcast and it's not a video show. Here is a Sports Geek stubby holder. Every one of my guests gets one when I get to meet them in person. So I have realised now I'm in England and I'm handing out stubby holders to keep beer cold, and you don't like keep beer cold.
It'll keep it warm.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an insulator.
It keep it warm. So thank you very much, and look forward to maybe next time you're down under to say hello, and I will buy you a cold beer if you were to come down to Australia.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Need help with your content? Book in for a content brainstorming session with Sports Geek now. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/work.
Thanks again to Michael there for inviting me to come out to have a chat in his offices there at 2020. All the links, as always, with every podcast are available in the show notes. This will be sportsgeekhq.com/48, always the episode number, and it will find the show notes. And don't forget, you can always track down and follow and connect with any of the guests by simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/SGP guests, and you can see a list of over 50 guests now that have been on the podcast, and thank you very much to those people. One of those people has been on the podcast before, Daniel McLaren, was kind enough to invite me to his digital sport event in London when I was in the UK on the recent Sports Geek trip. And we had a bit of a chat about the world of sport and how it's digital sport and how it differs in Australia and in the US as it compared to the UK. So here is a snippet of our conversation. And thanks again to Dan for inviting me, and it was really great to meet all the different people working in the sports digital world in London. So here's my conversation with Dan McLaren from Digital Sport Co. He's just launched a new website, previously the UK Sports Network. So check out digitalsport.co if you want to check out what's happening in London, the UK, and Europe overall from a point of view of digital. He's doing a great job of collating news and the notes and case studies of what's happening in that space.
Did you know Sports Geek Podcast has listeners in over 35 countries? Thank you for sharing.
Just like to introduce our kind of special guest for the evening. So Sean is over from Melbourne, Australia, doing a bit of a tour of UK and then on to Europe.
Yep.
And popping to see a few sports teams on the way. Sean, I don't know how many people, I'll do a pretty popularity test now.
Yeah, go on, try.
How many people have heard of Sean or Sports Geek, the podcast? You got quite a few.
That's pretty
you
good.
got quite a few.
Those Facebook ads that I targeted to UK are working.
Exactly. That could have gone painfully wrong, couldn't it?
Yeah, could have been.
But Sean very kindly had me on his podcast a few weeks ago, just chatting about social media and sports for UK and also kind of Australia. So we're kind of reversing roles on this one. We thought we'd make the most of the time that Sean's over here. If you've got any questions at all, just put your hand up. We'll kind of make some time at the end as well, but if you've got any pressing issues you'd like to ask Sean during this next kind of 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so, then stick your hand up. There is a prize, so if you want to get one of these, you can stick in your beer can in. Then it goes to anyone who asks a question in here. So we'll just get started. So Sean, in terms of kind of, for those who don't know about Sports Geek,
Yep.
if you can let us know a little bit more kind of how it came about, the kind of blog, the podcast, and then kind of the consultancy side as well.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, thanks for having me here. What's the hashtag for tonight?
DS London.
DS London. So everyone's got to tweet DS London. Take a photo of me here, right? So that'll legitimise my claim to the tax department. This is a work trip. So my Twitter handle is Sean Callanan, or Sports Geek is the Twitter handle. But thanks for inviting me. When I said I was coming over to meet with some teams, we pretty much just organised and said, yep, we'll do it this date because this is when I'm in town. Before I was Sports Geek, I was just a plain old geek. For 15 years, I was a coder, developer in the space, but I was also a frustrated sports fan. So when I finished up my last gig, I decided that I was going to give this whole thing a go. And I initially thought I would be, I'd lean on my IT skills and help people in sports with databases and websites and things like that. And this was around 2010. And I started by doing a trip similar to this, but I did it in the US. So it was the original Sports Geek trip, where I went to LA, Dallas, and New York in a combination of meeting with teams, part secret shopper, I was just turning up and talking to people, part stalker, by just meeting people. Does everyone know who Mark Cuban is? Mark Cuban? Mark Cuban is the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. He also was the first guy to stream radio with broadcast.com. He just put a microphone in front of a radio and streamed it. He sold it to Yahoo for like gazillions. So, he's a sports geek just like me. He's just got a few more dollars. So one of the goals was to actually meet Mark Cuban. I didn't get to meet him, but I did get to meet the CEO of the American Airlines arena on the trip. So and sort of going through that trip, social just sort of exploded. So similar to your work with the blog, I just started talking about how I thought sports teams would do social, and then I started getting some clients. So I stopped blogging. And so I've been working with sports teams, leagues, athletes, both in Australia and New Zealand, and then also speaking at conferences like SEAT in the States. And I started podcasting because I'm not a good writer, but I can talk. So I've done about 46 episodes now. You can find it on iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud and even the bad podcast stores like the Windows Phone Store. Apparently it's there. I didn't do anything, it just turned up. So that's pretty much it. That's what the podcast is. The podcast is me talking to people like yourself, people in the States, in the UK, and in Australia about what they're doing. So the podcast is built for people like yourselves, people who work in the industry, work in sports, business, sports, digital, in the tech side of things. And I just try to bring a bit of information and interviews into that space.
And in terms of Australia and where you see it at the moment, what do you think the main differences are, kind of comparing what in Australia to what you're seeing over in the UK?
So I think primarily Australia is mostly modelling a lot of its digital stuff off the US, because it's a similar model. So they're probably copying more. So the AFL, which is the Aussie rules, which is the main sort of football code in Australia, they're pretty much trying to copy the Major League Baseball with the everyone. I don't know if you know, the Major League Baseball have Major League Baseball Advanced Media or MLBAM, and they pretty much run everything, like all the tech, and they do absolutely amazing job. Who's a Major League at bat subscriber? Yeah, like get it streaming on your iPad or straight on your Apple TV. So AFL is set up. They've set up their own AFL media with the latest digital rights, and are trying to go down that model. So it's very much a league-pushed, league-focused model, which is what the NBA do, the NFL do. Whereas in the UK, it's a club-focused, clubs rule, they do their own thing. So a lot of the Australian sports market, and to a certain degree the US sports market, look on the UK scene with envy. Like they look at both UK scene.
Do you see that as an advantage or a disadvantage, kind of being league led, or?
It depends who you talk. It depends who you talk to. Like there is advantages in that league wide sort of model because everyone it's a level playing field, but then you work with the teams that have the cash and they would like to spend, and they're restricted, and so that could be this. Whether it's Collingwood or Essendon in the AFL, but you'll hear the same thing from the Boston Celtics or the LA Lakers, like they're stuck with the same formatted thing, website, and they can't go and do some stuff that Man City does or Arsenal do. So, so it is a restriction that they sort of have to work through. But Australia definitely, I think, is more copying what's happening in the US than in the UK.
So what are the hot topics over there at the moment? Is it kind of that much difference? I mean, I suppose one of the things we do hear occasionally, which is probably a little bit kind of in the negative side, I suppose, looking at Australia, is that Australia is behind in terms of what UK and US. Is that fair reflection, or is that being a little bit cruel?
I think it's a little bit cruel. You might make me start talking about the cricket.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Like, I don't think so anyway. Like, I come from Melbourne, and, you know, we discussed it when we were on the podcast. You know, I think, you know, it's one of the sporting capitals of the world. You know, there's 10 football teams, and, you know, I could rattle off all the things that happen in Melbourne. I think there's a lot of things that Melbourne and Australia all do really well. And it just comes down to a couple of things: population and resources. So Australia doesn't have the population to sustain the big numbers. So that, you know, there is a lot of people in the Australian sports business who look overseas, both in the UK and the US, and go, "Oh, I wish I had those resources." And those resources only come with the volume of people checking out the site. So I don't think they're behind as far as, you know, what they're doing, like from a point of view of what they're pushing out on social and content and those kind of things. But they're behind in as far as they don't have as many people to do it. So if you just, you know, if you're trying to compare apples and apples, it's very hard to compare, you know, Man United with an AFL team. But the content they're producing for what they've got is pretty good.
Yeah. In terms of kind of content and use of platforms, what do you think is kind of, what's your kind of best case examples that you would quote to clients or on your podcast? If you were doing it really well, and what kind of things they're doing?
Well, yeah, it differs. It differs on the goal of the team. So, and sometimes it's hard to tell what their goals are. So, as far as what they're trying to do, but with some teams, you're either trying to fill a stadium because you're trying to sell tickets, whereas others have a full stadium and just trying to keep all their fans happy. You know, so that's what a lot of the UK clubs are doing. Like, they're not worried about the fan in the stadium and getting them to the stadium. The stadium is fine. They're worried about servicing the people outside the stadium. Whereas, you know, there's other teams, you know, in Australia is the case, and, you know, in the US is the case as well, where they're trying to fill a stadium. So the strategy is completely different. You know, and you're going to talk about live blogging and stuff later. Like, a lot of the stuff that we do from a social point of view and sort of, you know, from a social strategy point of view is telling the fan why they should be there, like trying to tell that story. And social does a really good job of that, especially now that stadiums are getting Wi-Fi and people are Instagramming the shit out of the stadium, or, you know, taking photos of, you know, sunsets or scoreboards or whatever it is. People want to feel like they want to be there. So from a strategy point of view, for a team, if you want to drive more fans, you know, we've done it a lot with stadiums, so working with the SCG, like, we just want to facilitate the fans telling the story. And, you know, as more stadiums have the Wi-Fi, you know, I saw Man City have now got Wi-Fi, there will be an explosion of content coming out of that stadium now.
And what's the view over there in terms of stadium Wi-Fi? Is that
there should be stadium Wi-Fi? That is the view.
We had this discussion when I was up in Manchester last week, and we had Everton and Man City on. And obviously, Man City have gone down that route in Wi-Fi, but Everton are very much they're in a different situation. It's a very old stadium. They've got a smaller crowd, and their view is, until someone comes along with a really, really good proposition that really hits what we want to do and it's cost effective, then at the moment there's nothing out there for them. But they're not going to go down that.
That's not a UK or an Australian. That's a worldwide problem. So 2011, when I went to SEAT. So SEAT, if you don't know, is Sports Entertainment Alliance and Technology. So it's a conference that's been going for now 9 years. I think this is the 9th year coming up. Initially, it was all the CIOs, so all the tech guys behind sports companies. You know, they fire up their propellers and all meet and talk about zeros and ones and plugging shit into computers. So I went there in 2011, and only myself and, you know, Shane Harmon, if you know Shane Harmon off the internet. But Shane was the Rugby World Cup marketing manager, and now he's CEO of Westpac Stadium in Wellington. We were the only two marketers in the room. But at 2011, all the talk was Wi-Fi and DAS. SEAT now has grown to be having a CRM track and a digital track, because you need the three sort of components working. But we're not talking about Wi-Fi and DAS anymore because people are rolling it out. But not everyone's rolling it out. So San Francisco provide a really good example of, we've got AT&T Park on one side of the bay with the Giants. It has better Wi-Fi than my house. right? You can be taking a video and it's uploaded to YouTube before you finish recording it, right? It's that good. And so it's one of the most Instagrammed venues in the world because it's easy to do. But you go to the other side of the bay and you got Oakland in their older stadium. They're trying to pitch for a new stadium and they're like, it's going to cost us $2 to $3 million to put in the Wi-Fi. We can't justify it. So it's a problem. You know, people are getting past the who pays, because even last year at Kansas City at Seat, they're now seeing Wi-Fi as a utility of the stadium that you have to have in the same way you have to have bathrooms. So, you know, all the stadiums are now thinking, well, we've got to do it. That's part of what our service needs to be. So the who pays is starting to go away. You still got to put it in and stuff like that. But what they are seeing, and it's probably, you know, part of the equation when they're putting together the proposal, the amount of content and the amount of love that a stadium is getting when they've got Wi-Fi is ridiculous. Like, I was doing the social for the SCG when the Major League Baseball came down. So Major League Baseball opened the series in Sydney. And, you know, I was covering both the Twitter and Instagram. And the lines for the 24-inch long hot dogs were ridiculous. People were complaining like crazy on Twitter. Why are the lines so long? I'm like, just go to the fish and chip stand. It's empty. No, I want the big hot dog and I want the nacho fries. But when you went to Instagram, 95% love. Like, it was just pictures of the picturesque SCG, you know, the baseball diamond on the cricket field, which it was mind blowing, but it was completely positive. So when they go back and say, you know, why should we do it? You know, I'm giving a report saying, well, here's all the content that got produced, and look at how much people are loving the SCG from this visual story that's getting told.
Yeah. I mean, is that kind of a difference between, say, football and sports and the AFL, for example, over there in terms of Man City, Man United, etc., even rugby teams as well? It's not necessarily looking at the stadium. They're kind of like, oh, we fill that, we're already merchandising it. We want to target Asia, US. You know, if United have got 600 million fans globally,
yep,
that's a lot bigger than 75, 80,000 that are in the stadium. But if you've got 10 different teams in Melbourne, then you're kind of competing for local.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So it's more local than international.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So it's a completely local game or a national marketing effort. But you know, you're still fighting for the next fan. Like, you know, football is a lot like football here. You know, my dad barracked for Collingwood, so I didn't get a choice. So I barracked for Collingwood. My great-grandfather played for Collingwood. I wasn't going to get a choice. I'm quite happy with it. Normally when I mention Collingwood, it loses half the room. But you know, we were very, very much hated in most of Australia, but that's cool.
Cool. And just thinking in terms of kind of fan engagement, which is probably the main thing, isn't it?
Yep.
How you engage with fans to then, you know, build that rapport, turn them into advocates type of thing. What's kind of the best strategy you've seen that works best for you? So if you're kind of a sports team or so and you're looking at, you know, how do we get people to the stadium? How do we really get them involved with the brand?
So one of the things that I've been using for a while to sort of explain it, I was lucky enough to interview on my other podcast. I have a second podcast, and it's a lot like this one. It's called Beers, Blokes and Business, where I open up beers and talk business with my mates. And recently we had a guy called Will Anderson, who's a comedian in Australia, and he's pretty much the biggest and best comedian in Australia, and he came on the show. And he'd worked we did a recce for Twitter 12 months earlier, and he spoke about his social media strategy in effectively 140 characters. He goes, I don't care that I've got 250,000 Twitter followers. I just want 50,000 of them to buy one $50 ticket to a show a year. And everyone goes, geez, he's raking it in if he's doing that. And that's exactly the same strategy that we try to implement with the teams. You want to be getting, you know, it's great to say we've got 2,250,000, whatever it is, Facebook fans, but you've got to convert them to being, in our case, it's membership. And then from a social point of view, you want to be developing that, what we call your digital cheer squad. So in the AFL, at the MCG, when Carlton plays Collingwood and they're traditional rivals and there'll be 80,000 people there, there'll be 300 people down this end and there'll be 300 people down this end that will create the atmosphere. They will start the chants. It's not as tribal as, your football where the whole crowd is cheering. But if those guys start a chant, it will reverberate around the stadium. And it's the same thing that happens online. If you can get those 1,000 people to be tweeting about that and amplifying that and using your hashtags and talking about it, then it will spread. And that's how people find out about it. So that's always what we're trying to do when we're working with, digital and social media guys, to say you've got to find those fans and give them enough love so that they know they're doing the right thing. So whether that's favoriting their tweets, retweeting their stuff, that kind of thing. Like I was talking to Josh Tucker when he was down with the Dodgers. So he runs the social for the Dodgers. Over 1 million followers on Twitter. And he aims to favourite every tweet that mentions the Dodgers from a fan. Just to show the fan that it's like, yeah, we read it. Thanks. And I've seen it. I've seen guys who I've taught and trained get that giddy feeling of, oh my goodness, they liked my tweet. I had one of the guys tweeting with the Brooklyn Nets saying, we're looking forward to the game, and the Brooklyn Nets replied. And he went, oh. I'm like, you do that all the week. Every week you do that with your fans. But he got that same feeling. And if you can put that feeling in your fans, they're like, oh, what do you want me to do? I'm sure if, any club just went, jump, all these, how high? Where do you want me to jump? Where from? They're just ready to do it. So if you enable them to do it, then you're on your way.
I think a lot of clubs as well kind of struggle with kind of tone of voice as well to take. Do you go down the kind of, let's have a banter, let's have a laugh, take the mick out of you, which you do see in America quite a lot. They're taking the mick out of each other's accounts. I mean, that happened once, I can think of in the UK, when, I don't know how many people remember Bolton Reading game, when Bolton kind of goaded Reading a little bit on Twitter, and Reading won 7-0. And just Bolton got panned for it, and you can just see them going, we're not doing that again.
Yeah, yeah, because it was the Twitter guy's fault that they lost.
Yeah.
That's the funniest thing. If you spent less time tweeting and more time on your defence, you'd be good.
Yeah.
But you do have to have buy-in from management. If you're gonna do that kind of thing, I think the best example of that is the LA Kings when they went in that run from the Stanley Cup, and I've spoken to Dwayne Hankins who was running the LA Kings at the time, and it was a calculated risk. They knew we could do it, and you need to have there will be a coach that will be superstitious. Oh no, we don't want to do it. That won't do it. Do people know the LA Kings story from the NHL? So they were the 8th seed playing Vancouver, the 1 seed. Vancouver is not liked outside Vancouver, and the LA Kings went in to Vancouver and won game 1. We'll get the phone later. And after the game, they went, to everyone outside BC, you're welcome. That's what they tweeted. And their fans loved it. And that's the bit I loved. Their fans loved it. Who cared if they pissed anyone else off? Their fans loved it. And it was one of the most retweeted tweets of all time at the time. And it worked. And then the team got on a roll. And they just went with it. They arrived in New Jersey and just tweeted, gee, this place smells. They just ran with it. And as long as, what I fear when I see those kind of stories and, people hear about them, is that they're, cool, I'm going to do it now. And it's well, you've got to have some, the person writing them has got to have some nous. They've got to be naturally funny, can't be forced. It's still hard, very hard to do. Because you get it wrong and you look like an idiot. So, but they did go and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to play that smart aleck role for the playoffs, and management knew what they were doing. And what happens now? They have a Twitter sponsor. McDonald's is on their Twitter avatar, and they got money for it. So, it's win-win.
SEAT 2014. See you in Miami in July.
That's right, DJ Joel. SEAT 2014 is almost upon us. And as I said last podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you would help me out and provide me with some of the great content and campaigns that have worked for your sports over the time. You can simply send me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com, with some great content that you've either seen or even stuff that you produce yourself. I've had some great nominations from the guys at NASCAR and some good nominations in the YouTube space with guys like Green Edge cycling team over here in Australia. So again, send me your best. I would love to include it in my presentation at SEAT. That clock is telling me to wind this show up, episode 48. Thank you again for listening, and also thank you to Jess for sending in this week's Sounds of the Game. And that audio, if you have been living under a rock, was actually from the game straight after Donald Sterling was suspended for his racist comments. So very emotional game. And thank you very much for Jess for sending it through. I think that the Clippers have done a tremendous job in, I guess, taking ownership of that issue, and the fact that they rebranded their whole site with that "We Are One" message was a really great example of what you can do to try to turn a poor situation around. That's it for this week of Sports Geek Podcast. As always, you can catch me on Twitter at Sean Callanan, and if you could leave a review on iTunes, I'd very much appreciate it. Cheers.
Find all Sports Geek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Want to maximize returns from your digital team? Contact Sports Geek about content and commercialization workshop. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.